Welcome, Gunrunner.
My Amazing Facts series has proven to be a very popular addition to the channel, with many of them ranking up there in my top 20 videos when I look at my analytics. When I've run polls to decide the subject of the next episode, I've also seen some very high engagement with hundreds of votes, but I've never seen anything quite like my most recent one. In fact, the result of the poll had even changed in the period between me starting the script for this video and finishing it. When I first started putting words down, the Bally Astrocade was winning with the 3DO in second and the Sega SG-1000 in third. However, there was just 1% between each placing. However, by the time I finished writing this video, the 3DO was now winning, with the Astrocade and SG-1000 tied for second. So I must apologise to all the 3DO fans who turned up to try and get it over the line. I did do a 3DO related video last week, however, so that may keep you happy. What makes this poll even more interesting though, is that the early leader, for several days in fact, was the Pioneer Laser Active, which ended up finishing 4th. And after that the SG-1000 took over the lead for a similar period, so it really could have gone any way. This poll certainly gave me food for thought when it comes to future Amazing Facts episodes, but let's leave those polls behind now and get talking about the subject matter at hand. Bally Midway was already the oldest coin-op manufacturer in the world when the 70s rolled around and arcade video games started to make an appearance, so it was no surprise to see them join Atari as one of the early innovators of the concept. However, in 1977 their biggest rivals one-upped them by announcing a home-based machine in the form of the Atari video computer system. Bally Midway looked over with envious eyes, but knew that they could come up with something better. And they certainly did, as just a year later we saw the debut of the Bally Professional Arcade, later renamed the Astrocade, a home console that was based on their tried and tested arcade hardware. Super conversions of games like Wizard of War, Galaxian and Space Invaders proved this superiority, with the console having the edge in terms of audio, sprites, memory and expandability. However, all this power came at a cost, and with a retail price of $299, nearly $1,500 in today's money, which was $100 more than Atari's console, it seemed a lot less appealing. Even with Bally Midway's arcade conversions, Atari still had the edge in both games and marketing too, thanks to the financial might of Atari's parent company, Warner Brothers. The Astrocade struggled on, however, under both Bally and the new custodians of the console, Astrovision, more on that later, continuing to lose ground to Atari's console, as well as other offerings like the Mattel Television, Magnavox Odyssey 2 and ColecoVision. The already slow sales of the Astrocade were killed completely dead by the infamous North American video game crash of 1983, when Astrovision filed for bankruptcy and the console was no more. Of course, Bally Midway would go on to much bigger and better things, culminating with the release of Mortal Kombat in 1992. But the Astrocade certainly remains an interesting footnote in their illustrious history, and more than worthy of its focus in this video, which will hopefully enlighten more people to this once powerful console's existence.
Bally Arcade, a new video computer system that gives you more than Atari or Intellivision. Arcade gives you 4-player capability and an incredible 256 colors. Arcade has features the others don't. A built-in music synthesizer, 3 built-in games, a calculator, and Bally Basic, making the Arcade a personal home computer. Arcade doesn't just play games.
In the late 1970s, Bally Midway contracted Dave Nutting Associates, distributors of the very first arcade video game Computer Space, to design a video display chip that could be used in all of their video game platforms, from stand-up arcade games to a potential home computer system. The system Nutting developed ended up being used in most of Bally Midway's arcade games of the era, including the likes of Gorf, Seawolf and Wizard of War. The chipset supported what was at that time a high resolution of 320x204 with 4 colours per line, when many arcade games of this time were still in black and white. Although to achieve this, a fast microprocessor was needed alongside it, as well as a decent amount of RAM, making it a quite expensive setup. Still, this cost didn't stop Bally Midway pushing ahead with a home version of the hardware in a market that was a lot more focused on price than the arcade industry. After internal arguments over what the system should be, a computer or a console, Bally Midway management finally settled on the idea of a home console after seeing what Atari had done with their video computer system. Originally named the Bally Home Library Computer, which I think we can all agree is a terrible name, the console was first advertised for sale via mail order only towards the end of 1977. However, delays in the machine's production meant that none of the units ordered actually shipped until April 1978, by which time the Atari video computer system was already making its mark on retail shelves alongside the existing Fairchild Channel F. By the time it finally made its way out the door, the console had been renamed the Bally Professional Arcade. In this form, it was mostly distributed via specialist computer stores and independent electronics retailers, meaning it had very little mass market exposure, unlike the Atari VCS, which was already widely available in big chains and department stores like Sears. Many retailers weren't very keen on taking a gamble on another product aimed at a thus far unknown market, especially one that was so expensive, meaning both the high cost and distribution delays cost Bally Midway dearly. Now, I've already mentioned that the Astrocade was a very powerful system for the time, albeit at a very high price, but let's dig down a little bit more into that hardware because it's an essential part of the console's unique identity. The basic system is powered by a traditional 8-bit Zilog Z80 CPU, which also drives the video display chip with a RAM buffer in between. The original VDP used in Bally Midway's arcade game had two modes, a low resolution mode at 160x102 and a high resolution mode at 320x204, both with 2 bits per pixel for 4 colours per scanline. This setup was normally beyond the capabilities of the slow RAM of the era, which could not read out the data fast enough to keep up with the TV display, but the Astrocade used page mode addressing, allowing it to read one line at a time at a very high speed into a buffer inside the display chip. The line could then be read out to the screen at a more leisurely rate, with little interference to the CPU, which was of course using the same memory. On the Astrocade, the pins needed to maximise this design were not connected, leaving it with just the low resolution mode. This was mostly down to cost, as it meant Bally could put just 4096 bytes of RAM on the board. This was needed to program functions such as keeping score and game options, with the game itself being placed in ROM. The Astrocade cleverly used colour registers rather than a set palette, so the 4 colours could be picked from up to 256. Horizontal blank interrupts could be implemented to change the colour from line to line, and an additional set of 4 colours could be swapped in at any point along the line, allowing the creation of 2 screen halves split vertically. Originally intended to allow the creation of a score area or info panel on the side of the screen, programmers also used this trick to get 8 colours per scanline instead of 4. The Astrocade also differed from most other consoles by not including dedicated sprite support. Instead, it had a blitter-like system that allowed the Astrocade to support any number of sprite-like objects independent of hardware. This was a very innovative and adaptable system, but it did have 2 quite big downsides, in that it was up to the software to redraw the objects when they moved, and this used up valuable CPU time. Even so, it was an incredibly advanced design for the time. Finally, there is the audio, which was produced by a custom chip that also supported I/O functions. This chip supported 3 square wave channels with 8-bit pitch accuracy, as well as a standalone noise generator. Each channel also has independent 4-bit volume control, as well as 2 bits for the vibrato speed and 6 bits for vibrato depth. Again, meaning that the Astrocade's audio is well in advance of anything else out there at the time. Despite all the research and development, not to mention cash ploughed into it, the Astrocade ended up being a victim of Midway's huge arcade success, as the company chose to give up on it to focus on where all the big profits were being made. This saw the Astrocade console sold on to a company called Astrovision, who had been struggling to find a company to team up with to build their own console design. This new relationship was perfect for them, because Midway Manufacturing could continue to produce the console, with Astrovision taking on distribution, development and marketing. The story goes that a corporate buyer from Montgomery Ward, who Bally had been negotiating with at the department store chain, put the two groups in contact, and a deal was eventually arranged in 1981. The new company re-released the rebadged Bally computer system with a basic cartridge included for free, but consumers failed to find this appealing, so they had another rebrand the following year to the now commonly used Astrocade name. It continued to be sold under this moniker until the console was officially discontinued in 1983 due to the decimation caused by the much talked about North American video game crash. The big problem with this arrangement was that the new company would now have to pay various costs to Bally Midway for production, licensing and royalties, leaving them little room for profit. This was of course win-win in many ways for the console's creators, giving them a steady income without any risks being involved. As I mentioned at the start of the video, Bally Midway had initially discussed the idea of making a home computer instead of a console, but after they settled on the plan to produce a traditional games machine, they also set about plans to create an add-on for the Astrocade to turn it into a fully blown home computer, giving users the best of both worlds and giving Bally another bragging point over Atari. They soon announced an expansion system for the console, known as the zedgrass 100, which would do just that. The zedgrass unit sat onto the Astrocade and turned it into a proper home computer, including a full keyboard, math coprocessor, 32K of RAM, and a new 32K ROM containing the Grass programming language. This unit also added I/O ports for a cassette and floppy disk drive, and provision to use CP/M with the latter too. The zedgrass was being developed by a group of computer engineers at the University of Illinois in Chicago, known as the Circle Graphics Habitat, alongside engineers at Nutting. However, it was still not ready for release when Bally Midway sold off their consumer division, but development did continue. A small amount of units were produced by Astrovision as the zedgrass 32, following the changeover in ownership, but the add-on was never actively promoted by the new company as part of their marketing strategy. This means that the zedgrass unit is now very rare and sought after. Another innovative feature of the Astrocade is its controller, which is often likened to the one included with the rival Fairchild Channel F. This is a relatively complex input device, especially when compared to Atari's classic CX40 joystick, incorporating several types of different mechanisms. The controller is shaped like a pistol-style grip, with trigger switch on the front, a small 4-switch 8-way joystick on the top, and a potentiometer in the shaft, meaning it can be rotated like a paddle controller too. On the front of the unit is a 24-button keyboard used for selecting games and choosing options, as well as operating the calculator. On the back were a number of ports including connectors for power, the controllers, and an expansion port, but no third-party controllers of any kind were ever developed for the Astrocade due to its failure in the marketplace. This also means that anyone wanting to pick up the console in the present day might struggle to find additional or fully working controllers. One of the key selling points of the Astrocade was the availability of a basic programming language. Written by Jamie Fenton of Gorf and Datsun 280 Zap fame, Bally Basic was an extended version of Lee Chen Wang's Palo Alto Tiny Basic. Developing a basic interpreter on the system was very difficult, because the display alone used up almost all of the available system RAM, so Jamie came up with the innovative solution to utilise the video RAM for program storage instead. Programs were entered via the calculator keypad on the console itself, with a plastic overlay displaying letters, symbols and basic keywords, and these were selected through a set of 4 coloured shift keys. An interface and cables were provided to connect the Astrocade to a standard tape deck to save your work. A simple line editor was also supported. Bally encouraged users to write down their own listings or save them to cassette and send them into the company for potential publication. This led to a small homebrew scene popping up for the Astrocade, almost like a public domain library, with indie developers eventually releasing their own unofficial games like Spectre Systems with Treasure Cove and ICBM Attack, and L&M Software with Ms. Candyman and Sea Devil, amongst many others. The most famous example of a Bally Basic program that later became a commercial release, however, is Artillery Duel. John Perkins wrote the game and submitted it to the Arcadian fanzine, from which it was adapted for the revised Astrobasic manual. Perkins was then subsequently commissioned to develop an Astrocade cartridge of that very same game. As talked about in more detail earlier in this video, in 1981 a new company called Astrovision took control of the sales and marketing for the Astrocade console and its software. The big problem with this was that the new company would now have to pay Midway to license all the coin-op conversions already available for the console. This wasn't really a problem for existing coin-op conversions like Datsun 280 Zap or Amazing Maze, but caused huge problems for Midway arcade ports that hadn't yet been released, like Wizard of War and Space Zap. The only option was to change the names to avoid paying expensive licensing fees. So Space Zap became Space Fortress and Wizard of War transformed into Incredible Wizard. But this new relationship caused even more issues with Bally's existing Taito and Namco licenses, because not only would this mean paying two sets of licensing costs for the game code and the associated property, but would also lead to lawsuits from Atari, who had since secured exclusive home rights for all these games. So Pac-Man soon became Muncher, Galaxian was renamed Galactic Invasion, and Space Invaders morphed into Astro Battle. These name changes managed to keep all the lawyers happy for the moment, but I imagine that had the Astrocade become more successful and eaten into Atari's market share, they might have looked into this situation a little bit more. Just as Atari had done with their own console, Bally Midway converted many of their most popular arcade games of the era to their home console. Early coin-op conversions included the likes of Datsun 280 Zap, Seawolf, Amazing Maze, Gunfight and Checkmate, with the latter two actually being built into the machine. But the best was yet to come, as Midway also started bringing big-name arcade games over from Japan, signing licensing deals with both Taito and Namco, which resulted in Midway distributing the likes of Pac-Man, Galaxian, and of course Space Invaders, which brought massive success to the company. It was only natural that these games would soon appear on the Astrocade too, and the ports seen on the Bally machine put the ones released on the rival Atari 2600 to shame. I've actually changed things up slightly with the background video in this part, so you can clearly see the superiority of the Bally versions when compared to those put out by Atari. The Astrocade iterations win in every single category, from colours and sprites to speed and sound. It's a shame that Bally didn't do more to publicise the superiority of their Pac-Man and Space Invaders ports, in particular because I'm sure it would have significantly swelled their user base. There aren't many consoles out there, if any, that have an afterlife as interesting as the Astrocade. Earlier in this video I discussed the zedgrass computer add-on and the story behind its development, but there is actually a lot more to this story. You see, after the Astrocade add-on was created, the Circle Graphics Habitat at the University of Illinois developed the hardware further for use in film and video, a project they referred to as the Z-Box. This project eventually evolved into a machine that could be used to make high quality coloured text and graphics for output onto videotape and film. Indeed, it was soon being used as a titling system by numerous cable television companies. In fact, it represents what seems to be the first dedicated graphics workstation. The final system was sold as the Datamax UV1 and first released in 1980. It carried on being produced in small numbers for several years before being squeezed out the market by more practical and affordable home computers that could also help perform other functions in the studio, from music production to word processing.
Astrocade,
the professional video game system that gives you 4-player capability, 3 built-in games, a calculator, and these new cartridges, Creative Crayon. Even the young can make beautiful pictures. The Incredible Wizard has a dungeon of surprises for you. You can even create your own games with Astrocade Basic, the easy computer teaching cartridge. Astrocade, the home entertainment sensation that's a personal computer too.
And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing Bally Astrocade facts. But which one of these fabulous facts was your favourite, or can you think of any other tantalising tidbits of trivia that I didn't include? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to following patrons in particular, their much appreciated pledges: Mitchell Valentino, Grady Haynes, Neptune, Seth A. Robinson, Carl Olsen, Dos Gamerman, Aussie B, D Vaughan, Troy Dube, S-Mania999 and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host extra content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.